Hello and welcome to the lecture on layout with CSS. So now that you know how to create a box, how to float the elements, how to position the elements and how to display them inline or block, it's the right time to learn how to do a layout. Means how to have a header and a footer, sidebars, and then the content area. Okay, we're going to create that layout now. Okay, and I'm going to show you images to show how we are trying to achieve these layouts. Okay, so let's do this example. All right, so I'm going to copy paste a couple of files here. So first we're going to do the layout. Okay, what is a layout, right? If you look at this layout, you have an header layout, header box, then you have a content box, then you have a footer box. Okay, so you have three different type of boxes available. That's basically the layout. You have a header layout, content layout, and a footer layout. So this is one of the layout without the sidebars. That's the first layout we'll create. We'll create a header, we'll create the content, we'll create the footer, and we'll not have sidebar. So eventually we'll try adding the left sidebar and the right sidebar. Okay, so we'll start with this file. We'll see what's inside that file. Okay, we'll open this file first. Right, it's just the text, nothing inside in it. And then we will try to, this is the header layout, this is the content layout, and this is your footer layout. So we'll try to add some CSS to this, and then we will try to have a nice layout for this. All right, so let's create, we'll duplicate this. So layout with header and footer. Right, let's open this file. What we can do is we can even preview the file and see how it's behaving in the output. Okay, this is the output. Let's open up the file. All right, so let's add the CSS. All right, so let's start doing it. You can even say style. Okay, and then you can start adding the styles here. Okay, we'll change these tags. Okay, we'll not add a class, but we'll change these tags. Okay, it's simple to understand. You have an header, you have an articles, two articles in this section, and then you have a footer. There's nothing fancy here. You have an header, you have section and articles, and then you have a footer. Okay, so we'll work on the tags now. So we'll have a body, and this is the width of your page, so 940px. So you can go up to 940px. So when you float, the text will float all around to 940px. And when you want to bring things in the center, when you see like this, right, you can see align center. Always you can see align sector, but what is a good way to do it, you can have the margin of 0 and auto, so they all float to the center. Okay, they all float center. Okay, and then you can have a font, and there's a way you can mention points or EM. You can mention your size of your font in EMs as well. And then you can name your font. There's a backup. If that font is not available, you can go back to another font, close it here, put a comma, and then the sans serif. Okay, so now your body is ready with the text. Let's edit the header, section, article, aside, footer. Okay, we'll say display as block. So we want to have a new line for everything. Then header and footer, we also want to have a padding. We want to remove the padding, and we want to text align center. Right, and if you refresh it, okay, you can see it's align center. You have this nice margin 0 auto, basically brings everything to center. And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to make the text to the center, and then you have a nice layout where you have the header, you have sections, articles, and then you have footer. Okay, let's enhance this, and let's enhance this by adding the sidebars. Okay, so what we want to achieve here is we're going to create one more layout. We have done with header, content, and footer. Let's add this left sidebar, and this left sidebar you will have an image and some caption to it. Then you have some links which is floated to the left, and then you have this border which is dashed border, okay, dotted border. All right, so we'll add this left sidebar, and then we'll try to float them onto the left, okay, and then the content to the right. I'm going to create this. So for this we have to have another file, so let's copy paste this file with left bar. Okay, let's open this up. Okay, here we have footer, we have header, we have section. What we can do is we can have a sidebar here, and I'm going to copy paste the sidebar here. So that is basically the sidebar. Obviously you have to move this to the left, right? The only thing that I'm doing it here is I'm adding an image, then fig caption, then I'm adding some links here, okay, with the UL tag. Now let's look at how you have to put it to the left side. Okay, before that we're going to look at the output. There's no image here. Let's copy paste our image. All right, so image will be appearing here. Close this, open a new one. Okay, so your layout doesn't looks good because it's all floating onto the block, so it's just floating one after the other. What you want to do is you want to float this left so that this block comes sit side by side. Okay, so let's do that. So what you can do is you can go to a side and you can say float left. So once you say float left, you're almost the page has been done, because you have a left bar, you have your content, you have your header and footer. You can add a line here by adding the border, right? And then this basically looks like the format that we want to create as well, right? You have your left bar, you have header, content and the footer. All right, so let's do some touch-ups here. You have section, and we'll say float right, just in case if they are not floating onto the right, you can make sure they are floating onto the right, the sections. And they have a width, they have their own width of 700px. Okay, and you want to really have a padding to the left so that the image and the text doesn't go attached to themselves, means the left sidebar and the content doesn't attach themselves, so you're adding some space there. Okay, and then you want to put the border now, right? If you look at the output, okay, I'm trying to add some border here. 2px solid, you can say dotted, right? Hash B2A497. Okay, you see the dotted line here. Then you can add to footer, you can clear from both. This is important. Clear both will clear all the floatings that is happening. To float one after the other, you have to break that floating. And you want to say footer, I want to in a new line, so you'll say clear both. And you will have the width for the footer 940px and height is 100px. And you can add some padding to the footer to look it nicer, right? And once you do that, you basically get a nice formatting as we want to have it, right? Let's look at this, what we want to have. Yeah, it's exactly the same the way we want it, right? We want to have the dotted line, and then we want to have some padding onto the footer, and then this is floating onto the right, this is floating onto the left. Then you have some space over here that you have added via the padding, and then it looks nice with the layout of left sidebar, content, the header and the footer. So let's create a navigation. So what we want to do is we want to add a navigation bar right after the header. Okay, so let's create that navigation. All right, so we'll add the navigation now. So we'll show you how the navigation looks like. Okay, so I've copied this layout. Let's open that up. So you have your header, content, footer and left sidebar. So this is the navigation we'll create: home, about and contact. This is a navigation right after the header. Okay, so we'll open up our navigation file. So right after the header, you want to add the navigation. So let's look at it. right? Right after the header you want to have the navigation, so we'll add the navigation here. Okay, you see it's here, we just float inline, we'll remove the dots and it should be good to go. All right, so let's do some settings onto the navigation. So we are in the header and the footer, so we'll add it here. So for the navigation we will text align to center, so they go to the center, right? And onto the li, first we add to the ul, we'll remove the list style. None, so list is gone. Okay, and we'll remove the padding as well. We'll also remove the margins from bottom, so it really look like the content is starting right after the menu. Okay, now we'll to the list items, we have to display inline block. Remember we have discussed about that. Okay, so once you have the inline block, they are aligned in line by line. Now you can control the margin and all those things, right? 0 0 0, and then you want to have 50 px onto the left, and they have the spacing there. And then you can add the width as well. Okay, so they have the 100 px width, so it looks nice. Now you have a navigation bar where you can have the links, and the navigation bar is right after the header. Okay, so let's continue. Let's add the right sidebar and then we'll close this page. So this is the layout we are doing. There's the fourth layout. So we are added the header, navigation, content and footer and the left sidebar. Let's add this right sidebar. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create that page. Let's open that page. So we'll have the same aside, and this time we'll have this right after the content, so we can float them onto the right. Okay, so let's look at the example for this, how it looks like. Okay, they are floating right after it, so it just float it right after this content. So what we can do, we can create left and right, and then we can attach it this to left and this is to right, and I think that should be enough. So we have aside which is floating left. Now we can say aside dot a left. Okay, and then we can float it left. We can say aside dot float left, and we can say float it right. All we have to do is we have to take this class and aside, add it to the aside. Okay, it float left. Then you take this, go to your another right sidebar, and you just have to say right. So you still see that it is floating onto the bottom. It's still on the right side, but it's still floating it down. So what we can do, we can look at this section, this content area, right? What we can do, the section is right side aligned, we can make it left, right? So now we can reduce the size so that this can fit in, right? So if you say 500, yeah, so it fits in here now. All right, so this fit in now. So just add the line, dotted line here, and then you're almost done with the page. Okay, so we're just playing around by left and right, floating them left and right, and that's all we are trying to do it here. Okay, let's add the dotted lines to the section now. Okay, we can say border right, same thing, and then we have a line here. They're very simple to follow and very easy to create layout. So you see, with simple CSS, right, you can actually create a beautiful HTML page layout. Okay, and we haven't done really anything here. We have just worked on the layouts. Okay, we have aligned the things onto the left and then pushed the content to the left and this one to the right, and then we have added some dotted lines, and rest of the things we have just added the width, and then we pushed everything to the center. Then here we have display inline block, and then we have added some padding and spacing into the list items, right? So if you look at this page from CSS point of view, you should understand how many boxes are there and then how you are moving those boxes onto the page. Okay, so by now you should be able to understand how the CSS works, right? How to create the box, how to add margins, how to add paddings, how to move around the box to the left and right, how to make them display inline and block inline. And what we are trying to do here is we are just playing around the box. If you have to remember one thing about CSS, there is a magical box inside every element, and you can show it via these boxes. Okay, you are playing around these boxes. The CSS is nothing but playing around with these boxes. You have boxes for every tag, for every element onto the HTML page. There is a magical box. All you're trying to do is you're trying to visualize how should I move my boxes. Shall I add the margin top, margin bottom, padding left, padding top, putting them onto the floating onto the left, floating onto the right? Where is my position fixed, absolute or relative? This is what you're doing in CSS. If you're really thinking about CSS, you have to think in boxes, because all the layout is defined in boxes. You can see there are all the elements are boxes. So when you work around doing a layout, think of as a box. You could draw on a paper on a boxes and see which box you want where. Then you try to define those elements, HTML elements, and then create that boxes around that elements, right? Then you try to place them wherever you want to place them onto the HTML page. Okay, so that's all about how to work out with layouts with CSS. Do this exercise so that you get to understand many of things, like how to work with display inline and how to float the item boxes to left and right, and how to play around with the boxes with margins and paddings. Okay, so that's all in this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.